Hey everybody, this is Bridget Murphy, co-founder and CEO of Koru K9, back again with another AMA with my host, my husband Ray, and our very good friends and amazing trainers from Seattle, Shane and Damian. Today we are discussing the question that a lot of you asked: what exactly is balanced dog training? And so I'm going to just start with this big question, and then we'll fine tune it. But Damian, I would love to just kick it over to you first. What's balanced dog training to you?
Yeah, absolutely. To me, balanced training is a holistic and like a lifestyle approach to training. People hear sometimes like a balanced dog trainer, and they think just the tools, right? Like that. Oh, these are trainers who use tools, which most do, and they're extremely valuable to use appropriately. But it's much more than that. I try to explain this to clients all the time how important a balanced life is, and I think as humans we can understand that, right? Like if we're overloaded with work, or if we don't work enough, all those things can be bad for us, right? Moderation and everything. So it's the same with dogs. So a balanced life is about a balance between work and play, a balance between free time and structure, a balanced relationship. Love is not enough. I say that to people all the time. Like, you can love your dog and love them to death and love them with everything you have, but that's not enough. You need to you need to be a leader. You need to have rules. There needs to be boundaries. And so to me, that's the main crux of it, is we want to balance life with our dog. When I talk about between work and play, having a dog earn things is a part of that, right? I say this, and I believe Ray is the one who told me a long time ago, which is that no free lunch policy, right? Like, that is a great way to create a balanced life, because they're earning all those good things. It's not about withholding anything. It's about them earning it, right? So they work to get their rewards. That creates value in the work. That creates value in the rewards, right? It helps. A balanced life helps your dog want to do things for you and not just have to do things for you. And so by sticking to that no free lunch policy and kind of focusing on that lifestyle, that's how you're going to build a relationship you want. One based on leadership, communication, and respect is super important. So it's not just about, okay, yeah, we use the tools. The tools are just a means to an end. It's something that we use to create a communication system so that we can live a balanced lifestyle, and create value in things. So I think for me, that's the main point of a balanced trainer, is that we're looking at it holistically: the relationship, the training, all that stuff. The dog works, the dog plays, the dog has free time, the dog has structure, and we create that balanced life. And to me, that's how you get the relationship, which is the number one thing that you need: the appropriate relationship where your dog looks to you, has value in the work, has value in the rewards, and wants to do things for you.
I love that. Yeah. Shane, what's balanced dog training to you?
He pretty much said it all with that. Balanced dog training to me is, of a whole, it's a big part of it is communication, with your dog, understanding your dog, getting to know your dog. The tools obviously are very important. Communication is very important with your dog. So when they talk about balanced training, a lot of it is about the communication with your dog. How we communicate with our dogs is through collars. It's all about understanding, but I agree with them. Your bond is just important with your dog. You want them to work for you. Balanced training is it says it in the name. It's balanced. So a balanced lifestyle is exactly what Damian said. From the work to the play, to the communication as well, super balanced. But your routine is a part of that too. You want a balanced routine. You want a routine with your dog that you can do longevity, and that's balance, right? And that's a big part of balance training for us as trainers, is teaching you how to do that and giving you realistic expectations on how to do all these things: communicate with your dog, engage with your dog, play with your dog in a way that's structuring and fun. And not only are you having fun and learning, the dog is having fun and learning, and you have the tools to communicate these things with the animal. And I think that's what balanced training is all about.
So can I ask either of you, you guys are talking a lot about structure, a lot about balance, a lot about using tools of communication and kind of setting boundaries. And, it sounds like a kind of regimented lifestyle that you're proposing for a lot of dogs. Why is it that some dogs need more of this than others? You know, you've got Rusty, the golden retriever, who doesn't have any rules and or any tools in his life, but he's not bothering anybody. He just kind of walks around with his owner every day. And it's cool. But then you got somebody else with, you know, a rescue they just got from, you know, the Humane Society, and he needs all these tools and structure. How would you explain that to clients out there?
So one of the major factors in that is genetics, right? So you have this, you know, retriever who's probably been, you know, bred to be a companion and doesn't have these natural issues that some of these other dogs have. You take a dog like that's a rescue dog, it's lived an extremely inconsistent life, right? And no consistency probably in its life. And therefore it's grown up without that balance. So, and every dog is different. There are dogs out there, you know, and you have to have that hard conversation sometimes, like, you know, clients will want that dog, that golden retriever, Rusty, or, you know, who they don't have to do all this necessarily with, but that's not the dog they have in front of them. So genetics, their nature and nurture are both really important with that. And when you have a dog that has true issues and you have to do some behavior modification with, that's why it's so important. That's why that structure is so important. And just for me, when I define structure, just so, or at least the way I think of it is, have you told your dog what to do? Right? That is structure. Whether it's even free time, that's structured free time, that's structured play. It means that you have instigated, that you've created that moment and you're supervising. So when you have a dog who, to me, again, the training is about rehearsing good behaviors and not rehearsing undesired behaviors. And so when you have a dog who naturally wants to rehearse those good behaviors, they don't need as much guidance. They don't need as much leadership necessarily, right? We let a dog's behavior dictate how much freedom they get. And so when a dog's behavior isn't where it should be, they don't get to make those choices, right? And as a leader, we have to take the responsibility. That's something people miss as well, is like, it's a huge responsibility. It takes a lot of effort to help a dog who has these issues and to structure their day and to practice all this training and communication. So we have to take that upon ourselves, and we have to show the dog how to live in our world. And so when you have a dog who genetically hasn't had the best, you know, setup and has lived a life where it's been very inconsistent or been able to rehearse these behaviors, that dog is going to need quite a bit more structure, a lot more training, whether that's obedience or you know, just teaching a dog how to be thoughtful, all those things. They're going to need more of that. Just like people, like we all have weaknesses and we all have strengths. So, and we just have to be honest about that. So for me, I think it's about genetics. It's about the lifestyle they've had. It's about the lifestyle that you're living now with the dog that you have. And so just being honest and saying, hey, here's the issues your dog has, and that's why they need this much structure. And there is light at the end of the tunnel for some of these dogs. We let a dog's behavior dictate that freedom. So as the dog improves, we get to relax some of that structure. So I think, and then there's a limit you hit, right? There's some dogs where it's like, this is as far as we go. This dog's always going to have this or that. Whereas this, you know, some other dogs might be able to get away with more freedom. So I think it's just being honest about the dog that's in front of them. Just like everybody needs unique help in their life, so do dogs. So I think that's the really where you get the difference between a dog who's like, yeah, it's a good dog, naturally kind of does everything it's supposed to do. And so its behavior dictates we don't need this much structure.
Yeah, Shane, he answered a lot of that, but maybe you can expand on this a little bit too. You know, when you've got a client that comes to you and they say, hey, I want my dog to hang out with me at the coffee shop, but he's got a lot of issues with dogs walking by or loud cars passing, you know, how do you have that conversation as to what dictates whether that dog's able to have that kind of lifestyle they thought they were going to have when they brought him home?
You know, I think a lot dictates that. I think people, you know, the shelter dog thing comes up a lot, you know, and like the past of a dog, you know, I agree with Damian as far as, you know, behavior and how the dog was raised early on. I think that's a huge part of this. A lot of people get dogs that came from the streets and they know nothing about it, but instinctual behavior, prey drives a lot of this. And those dogs are peaking when it comes to instinctual behavior and prey drive. It's something they've learned, whether they're out on their own, you know, and that happens a lot more when you do pick up dogs off the street. Realistically, I just have an honest conversation with them, and there is no amount of time, but you know, in situations like that, I don't ever tell them, hey, this is something that we can do, but we can do our best to get them to a point that they're manageable in those situations. Whether we can get them to be able to walk by, it's questionable, but we can do a lot with it as far as that goes. It's just managing the behavior and really giving the dog alternatives for behaviors in that situation and teaching them neutrality. I'll just go into depth about what we can do for the dog in these situations to make it manageable, and there is no guarantees with that kind of stuff, though. It takes time. Time is the key with all of this stuff. We just don't know how long that's going to take. So I think that's the key. Anything is manageable. You can mask a lot of things when it comes to dog behaviors and understanding. But dogs have breaking points too. You can only push them so far. They have thresholds that we got to stay within, and we can push those thresholds to a certain extent, but we have to, the dog is the one that's going to tell us what it can and can't do at the end of the day.
Great.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead,
Sorry. I agree wholeheartedly with both of you on all of this. I did want to talk about a little bit. Actually, Ray has a question, so let's kick it over to Ray before I switch subjects.
Well, what I wanted to do is fully define balanced dog training, and what I heard what it is, but I would like to hear from you guys is what it's not, and why is there so much misinformation on balanced dog training, and where do you think it's coming from?
So first of all, balanced dog training is not compulsion, right? That's kind of the idea that some people get in their mind. Well, we're going to put tools on a dog and we're going to make them do things. And to me, that couldn't be further from the truth, right? If anything, that is unbalanced, wholly unbalanced, just as unbalanced as, completely and utterly, whether they use the word positive only, even though that's not a very good term, but the idea of like, oh, we're never going to use pressure to help the dog. Both of those are equally unbalanced. So I think that's a big one is the misconception of, oh, these are compulsive trainers, use compulsion for their training because they're just going to use the tools. I don't use the tools. I don't put a prong collar and e-collar on the dog to let them make mistakes and then punish them. I don't put a prong collar on a dog to prevent your dog from pulling, right? I use the prong collar to teach your dog how to heel. It's a proactive tool, right? Like we got to fill negative space on what the dog should be doing, and then we can work on the stuff that it shouldn't be doing. So I think that's the biggest one, right? When they hear balanced dog training and they hear the tools, that's what they think, compulsion. So I think that's a big one of what it's not. It's not that. It's also not, it doesn't have to be like a boot camp military style. Like there is a lot of fun and love and playfulness in balanced dog training because it has to balance out the firm structure and things like that. So for me, the biggest misconception is the compulsion and the idea that, oh, your dogs must not be having fun if you're using balanced training. It's the exact opposite. I've created value in the fun, right? Like I've created the fact that they have to earn that fun means it means more to them. I use the example all the time that my first vehicle was I bought myself, right? It was an old beater. I love that thing. I paid for it, right? I saved up every dollar I had and I paid for it. It wasn't great, but I paid for it. And the value of that vehicle was through the roof for me, right? It's the same thing because I worked for it. And there's value in the work. There was value in me going to my job because I knew that I was getting rewarded for it. So it created a balance in my life. So I think that's really important for people to understand that it's not cookie cutter, right? That's another thing too, like every balanced dog trainer. In fact, you couldn't be further from the truth with that. That's the beautiful thing about being balanced is you use the, operant conditioning, you use all 4 quadrants, but you use them uniquely for each dog. So it's not compulsion. It's not, it's fun. And it's unique for each dog. So those are some misconceptions I think that people have about balanced dog training.
Cool. Shane?
I mean, balanced dog training, it's just all about communication. My goal is to get these dogs to be drawn to me, to be excited with me, to boost their confidence up. We don't just put collars on them and start starting the communication process. I build a bond with them. I get them excited to train. And then once they have a good understanding of what we're doing, they understand positions, they understand what I'm asking of them, then we integrate those collars in and start the communication process. But it's got to be clear before any of that happens. And I think that's the big part is people have this misconception that we just go in, throw collars on and just start using corrections of any sorts. And that's not how this works. There's thousands of repetitions in before we even start that process of communication, you know, because most of these dogs, we have to boost their confidence up. Most of these dogs for us as Koru trainers have behavioral problems, have anxieties, have aggressions. So and every dog, like Damian said, is so different. So we have to approach it so differently depending on the dogs. And then that's when thresholds and understanding thresholds come into play, you know, understanding, you know, what you can do with certain dogs and what you can't. And I think for me, you know, balanced dog training is about the communication with the animals, is about, you know, the excitement, the fun. What can we do for these guys, picking them up, you know? And I think the lack of communication is the problem with these animals. They're just unclear of what you want from them. And most people's communication styles make it really confusing for the dog. So they either shut down, they go into an avoidance, or they become more, they show more behaviors, you know. And once you start utilizing this communication, they become more neutral, calm, and they're excited and they're drawn to you, and you have way more engagement with the dog and way more, I mean, just way more fun, honestly.
Yeah. Go ahead, Damian.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more thing that, again, another misconception for the balanced dog training is that it's only for dogs with behavioral issues, like severe behavioral issues, right? Like that behavior modification and things like that. Absolutely not, right? The tools and balanced approach is wonderful for all. In fact, if you use a balanced lifestyle from day one, you won't have to worry about those behavioral modifications later on. So I have a dog in right now. She's wonderful. She's a 6-month-old pit who's just perfect. Like they just want some control, and we're having a blast. She loves the tools, and there's no reactivity, there's no anxiety, there's none of that. And I've been able to build so much with this dog. So that's another big one too, is they think, well, I don't have a bad dog, right? I don't have this aggressive or anxious dog. I just want training. I just want to, you know, work on obedience, or I just want to work on relationship. It's perfect for all of that. In fact, it's super important to start that early on.
Yeah, let me ask you just that follow-on that we didn't fully address is, where do you think the source of this misinformation on balanced dog training is coming from for the most part, and then why?
I think a lot of it's social media for misinformation, because it's pretty, you know, there's a lot, it's controversial sometimes. So people, you know, have extreme beliefs on it. So I think that's a big part of it. I also think a huge part of it is like ignorance. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, truly not knowing what we're doing. So they hear these things, they see these things, and so they just have a gut emotional reaction to certain things, whether it's the tools or whatever it is, instead of kind of investigating and kind of figuring out what it is. So I think what it is a lot of people who who really care about dogs, but they just have a misguided understanding of dog behavior and how to help a dog and what a dog really needs. That's a big one. People don't know before I became a dog trainer, what I thought a dog needed versus what I know a dog needs now. They're vastly different. And so again, our instinct is oftentimes wrong when it comes to how we handle these dogs. And so people will get really vocal about that. I think some people who have a limited understanding of training dog, like dog trainers who have a limited understanding of training dogs or have a very, very small tool bag, they also will perpetuate these myths or this misinformation because you know, they don't understand it, and so they feel threatened by that. And so a lot of times they're like, well, this is how I do it, it's the only way I do it, and if you do it any other way, then it's wrong. So I think social media has, you know, made that a little bit worse to some degree. I mean, it's also helped because we're able to have these conversations and kind of get the information out there. But a lot of times people just, you know, it's clickbait, you know, quick, fast information that isn't always accurate. So I think that's a big part of it.
Shane, what are your thoughts on that as far as the source of it? I mean, it's been my experience that there are a lot of very large rescue organizations putting this stuff out there to a lot of very inexperienced dog owners, and specifically calling out companies like us and what we do. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it could come from, you know, one situation, like someone having a bad experience. And I think that reflects on, you know, our conversations we had before of like really figuring out and finding the trainers that are specific to what your needs are and making sure that they are good trainers, because that can kind of spread gossip and spread things that aren't true as far as the training goes. I mean, I think there's a lot of misconceptions. You know, I've worked alongside some of these shelters, and a lot of the information that I've seen in like their ramp up programs to be a part of it, to volunteer are misleading, terms, like sticking your hand out to let a dog pet you, stuff like that, and, I just think it's just, they need a little education as far as that goes to understanding what balance training actually is, what these collars actually are, feel these collars, know the stimulation of what these dogs are actually getting when we do utilize it. It's all low level. It's at levels that you're not even going to be able to feel half the time. The majority of the time, low level stimulation, you don't feel. And I always tell people, even these collars feel like a TINS unit. It's a tingle. If you can feel it, if your dog is at a level that you could feel it, it's a very minimal feeling. So, just educating them on these collars and educating people on, how we utilize them and stuff like that. But I think the sources are coming, Damian kind of hit on that, is just coming from people that just don't really understand it,
Yeah, I actually wanted to add a little bit in here and expand on what both of you brought up. I mean, just to put it out there, I really think a lot of this has become the weaponization of words. I think a lot of times people will hear positive reinforcement and negative punishment or whatever the terms are, and mistake the fact that positive means to add, negative means to remove, reinforcement means just that. Punishment doesn't mean we're harming the dog. It means we're reducing the likelihood of a behavior. So I think it's become this kind of marketing of terms, unfortunately, that become misconstrued. And like Damian said, it's not, willful ignorance. It's just dog owners want the best for their dog. They want to love their dog and play. And these words can sound scary, and so I think it truly comes down to trainers like us to help educate owners on what these things really do mean and how it can add value to their dog's life. Ironically enough, we brought up social media, and I did have a little exchange on TikTok, which I was grateful for. It was clearly a purely positive trainer that was calling us out for using training tools. And their quote was that we are forcing and harming dogs into complying with us. So I just wanted to kind of pitch that over back to you guys, because I think a lot of owners do see these tools. They're scared by them because they don't know about them. And then they hear other trainers saying, well, you're hurting a dog, you're forcing a dog, you're making them do this. And, if you're such a good trainer, then why do you need these tools? That was one of the quotes too of, well, why do you need a tool? So maybe we could expand a little bit on the intricacies of how we use these tools and why cookies or positive reinforcement isn't enough in some of these circumstances. I'll let either one of you dive right in on that.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And that's a major point that you brought up, is the idea of, like, when you hear positive and negative, it doesn't mean good or bad. It means add or subtract. When we hear reinforcement and we hear punishment, it's a scary word, right? Like, people hear punishment and they think that that it's this bad thing, but no, it just like you said, it's about educating them that understands that reinforcement, it's just the opposite of reinforcement. When you reinforce behavior, whatever just happened is more likely to happen again. And when you punish a behavior, you're more likely that behavior is less likely to happen again. However, I'm a firm believer, and not a lot of people talk about this, that there is, if we're going to talk about words and the importance of them, yes, punishment is the scientific term, but there is to me, a definable difference between a correction and a true punishment, right? We use a ton of corrections. Correction is putting a dog back into a known behavior, which we have to teach the dog first. We have to use all the reinforcement so they have that known behavior. And then it's just a simple, nope, you try again, right? Yes, is there a time and a place for what I consider true punishment, which isn't putting a dog back into a known behavior, but rather saying, don't do that again, right? An example of that would be like if it's a danger to a dog or to another person or whatever it is, right? There's no known behavior to go back into. It's just, you can't do that. That is super rare, right? We don't normally, as dog trainers, do a ton of that because we are being proactive. We're telling the dog what to do, and therefore we can just put them back into that known position. So there is a little bit of, maybe that's semantics, but I think it is kind of important to understand that our punishment 99.9% of the time is a correction, which is actually correcting a dog into a known behavior. And the important part about that is the dog has to know the behavior. So, and how do you teach a dog? Through reinforcement. Now, there are plenty of dogs out there that are super food motivated, and there's some that aren't. So it's really important that we use all 4 quadrants, right? Positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement are equal and wonderful, right? I love giving rewards. I give rewards all the time, but oftentimes there's something more important to the dog than the reward, the positive reinforcement, the treat, the cookie. So we need something like negative reinforcement, where we add a little pressure and we take that pressure away when the dog does the right thing. There's no punishment involved in that moment when we're teaching, right? You shouldn't be punishing when you're teaching. You punish once the dog understands behavior, and you can start teaching them how to hold that position, how not to break it. And that's another reason why I'm not a big fan of positive only, because there's positive punishment, right? So it's a misnomer, because if you're positive only, are you using positive punishment? All of us use negative punishment. Every dog owner I've ever met at some point has taken something away from their dog when they've been naughty, right? So there's no difference between that and adding a correction in. Those are equal. They need to be used. There needs to be some thoughtfulness in using that. But that's the key there, is that we're using these tools to build behaviors, right? Reinforce behaviors. And then we can correct them later once they understand it. You cannot correct a dog in a language they don't understand. And you cannot unlearn a behavior through reinforcement. You can't, right? If your dog has rehearsed a behavior a ton, you can create an incompatible behavior, but you cannot unlearn that behavior without a punishment of some sort, a correction of some sort. So, and that's true of humans. I mean, if you think about it, if we're not ever corrected in our life, those people grow up to be not people we want to hang out with, right? They go their whole life with never being corrected, never being told, hey, nope, that's wrong, let's try again. And the same thing happens with dogs. All of a sudden, when you apply pressure, in life is pressure, whether that's spatial pressure, environmental pressure, social pressure to the dog, another dog, people, when that pressure hits, they're going to react, and they haven't been taught how to deal with that. So if anything, I think it's being totally unfair to shelter a dog by not using pressure, teaching them how to overcome it, build their confidence, because life is pressure, and it's going to happen. Something's going to happen that pushes them, and they're not going to understand how to handle that. So that's the whole totality of it, right? That's how we teach a dog how to live in our world. We build incompatible behaviors. We build obedience, which is communication. We reinforce that a ton, and then we can hold them accountable to the things they know, the things that we took the time to teach them. To me, I cannot think of a more fair way to live a life with a dog, right? It's totally unfair and somewhat cruel to never correct a dog's behavior. And so when life hits them in a way they don't like, they can't handle it, right? That's unfair. That's just as unfair as someone who just compels a dog to do things all the time and forces them and never teaches them anything. My goal is to teach a dog to want to do those things for me, not just have to, and then have a way to hold them accountable. Operant conditioning is learning through consequences, but consequences are good and bad. I'm not just talking about the bad consequences, right? You do the right things, you get freedom, you get food, you get love, you get all those things, that praise rather that that we give, pet and praise. Those are wonderful things. And then there's a consequence for doing the wrong thing. It doesn't mean it's this extreme consequence. It doesn't mean it's cruel. It doesn't mean it's mean. It just means that, nope, there's a correction involved. So I think that's the really important part. And that's what we have to do. This is the conversation I have with every client about how operant conditioning, balanced dog training works, right? Like, I am going to be as fair as humanly possible. I'm going to take all the time and effort to teach your dog what it needs to know. And then I'm going to hold it accountable, which is super fair.
Yeah, I think Damian said everything, perfectly as far as that goes. We aren't, the dog has to make the decision for everything we ask them to do. They have to learn all this stuff first. We just don't go in there and start holding them accountable. There's a whole learning phase before all of this, and so the correction is for when they have the understanding and it's very clear. That's when we come in and then hold them accountable for it. So it's a whole process involved with training these dogs. We're just not going in there with collars and just, correcting them. You can't force a dog to do anything. They have to make the decision themselves. And that's how you have a reliable dog and a dog that wants to work for you. You see trainers and you see people with these really well-behaved dogs. They're always so engaging and happy and want to work for that owner. That's what we do. That's what we aim for. And that's our goal in training, is to get those dogs to a place where everything is very clear and there is no confusion, because confusion causes anxiety. Confusion causes behavioral problems. Once you're clear with the communication with the dog, then that's when you get neutrality. That's when you get a dog that wants to work. That's when you get a super happy, playful, engaging dog. And that's what balanced training is known for. Is I want this to be clear. I want my dog to be confident, understand what I'm asking of them, but I am going to hold them accountable for what I am asking them to do. But these things that I'm asking them to do, they know really well, and it's very clear. So if they make the decision not to do that, it's okay for me to hold them accountable for what I'm asking them to do.
Awesome. I agree wholeheartedly. Damian, you had another point there.
Yeah, just real quick, and I agree with Shane, everything he said. But that one more point I didn't bring up is that why that no free lunch policy is so important. That because if we're working hard for the dog to earn rewards, and rewards aren't just food. Rewards are, anything they find rewarding, whether that's like freedom, right? Like to get to run and be wild and have that fun freedom, which I want every dog to have. But if the dog is getting everything it needs without working for it, it doesn't matter what we do. The dog is never going to want to do that. If I was getting, the example of like the car I bought when I was, with my own money, if I had 5 cars that were bought for me, of course I wouldn't want to go to work, right? Why would I? If I was getting a pocket full of money every day, there's no value in it, right? So the no free lunch policy and relationship is super key to this working. Or no matter how many treats you give the dog or how much reinforcement you give the dog, it's always going to be like, well, earlier I got it for free, so why am I doing this? So that's another big part of the training. I can give the dog the communication tools, I can give them the obedience. I cannot give the client my relationship with the dog. And so you have to show them, hey, here's how you become a leader. The no free lunch policy is the number one, but then also being proactive, being fair, communicating clearly. So I think that's a big part of using the tools and building this balanced lifestyle is having rewards and something for them to earn.
Yeah, I think there's one other thing I would like to clarify for people too, is a lot of times owners are actually giving the wrong stimulation to the dog at the wrong time. It becomes a timing thing. So when you show up for your dog appointment and the dog's, snarling and showing teeth and looking like it's trying to eat you, and the owner's just petting them to saying, it's okay, he's fine. What are you saying to that dog? You're doing a great job barking and looking nasty at that guy who's coming through the door, right? So it becomes a mixed message that's being sent to the dog. So honestly, what they end up doing is they're reinforcing the bad behavior because their human instinct tells them, I should be comforting this dog that's afraid of this person coming through the door. So I think that's a really big point to make, because I try not to get too scientific with the operant conditioning with our clients, but I put it in terms they understand. I basically define, hey, by you touching that dog right now and saying it's okay, you're not saying stop doing that behavior. You're saying do it more. And is that what you want? You know what I mean? And then I get them to answer that. And then they start to understand this whole operant conditioning thing that we keep talking about. So I just wanted to bring that point up. Go ahead, Bridget.
Yeah, no, I think, and this builds on the point that I was actually going to make too, is, and Damian, you were touching on this as well. I think quite often humans, when they hear rewards and consequences, Damian, you said it, everybody thinks food, or they think we're punishing the dog. I think it's very important for dog owners to understand that no matter what the reward or consequence is, the dog dictates that, right? It's not us as a human, because what we'll hear all the time is, I don't want to do this with my dog. I want my dog to do this. It's not about the human at that point. The dog says, I like cookies, or I would much rather have love and affection. That's what we want to build. And consequences, again, a consequence for one dog can be just like, hey, knock that off. Another dog has a different consequences. So we're always ebbing and flowing based on the dog that's in front of us. So I think it's really important for people to understand that. I think we should touch a little bit more on the term holding dogs accountable. Ironically enough, this got popped up into social media as well. Somebody said I was hypocritical because I actually used that phrase. I said, we want to hold the dog accountable. And they made it seem like it was a negative thing. Like holding people or holding a dog accountable for their actions was negative in their opinion. So I would love your guys' feedback on what that means to you both on holding a dog accountable and why that we don't believe that to be a negative thing. So I'll kick it over to you, Damian.
Yeah, to me, that's a crazy kind of a wild outlook on life. Every creature on the planet is held accountable. Even a wild animal is held accountable, right? Like if it doesn't hunt properly, if it makes a mistake and comes into the den of another creature, like life creates or holds you accountable. What we can do as humans who are smarter and more clever and more logical than a dog can create appropriate accountability. So that's a mindset that has to change from the owner, right? Like holding your dog accountable is not a bad thing. I'll give you a quick example. I use this with clients sometimes. If you had, you have teachers, right? Like in class, you're going to college, whatever. If you could have 3 different teachers. You could have one who comes up to you, says you failed, didn't mark anything, right? Didn't tell you what you got wrong. That would be terrible. You didn't really learn anything. Yeah, you failed, but there's nothing there that you're going to learn from it. There's no way to learn. You're not really being held accountable. You're just being told you screwed up. Another thing, another teacher might be one who you did really poor, but he's like, man, he tried really hard. I'm going to give him an A. You're not being held accountable there either. And in fact, when you get out in the real world and you find out you're not as good as you thought you were, life's going to hit you hard, right? So holding us accountable is not just coming up and saying, hey, you were bad and you're being punished, or, oh, it's okay no matter what you do. It's that teacher that comes up and says, hey, you got a D. Here are the ones you missed. Here are the chapters you can read, and I'm going to give you another shot at that test. That's holding someone accountable. That's showing them, hey, you didn't do this right, but man, I'm going to help you. I want that third teacher. I don't want somebody who's going to sugarcoat it, and I don't want somebody who's just going to come down on me all the time. So I think it's really important for people to understand that that's just the way life is. You have to be held accountable, because if not, things slip, things get out of control. And dogs, as much, I love dogs. I don't have any children and I just have dogs. Like I love my dogs so much, but they are animals. They're not born thoughtful. They're born instinctual, right? So the idea that we're going to let this animal figure life out without holding them accountable, without teaching them things, without being proactive is unfair and irresponsible. And I think you could probably convince a lot of people who might think that holding a dog accountable is not fair or not nice. I think you could convince most people with an honest conversation that that's not the case. And just understanding that anything that we can expect, life to hold an animal accountable, we can hold them accountable. We can do it in a better way, right? We can do it in a more fair way. So to me, I think that if you can't get a client to at least come to understanding that that's the right thing, that holding a dog accountable, especially to things that we took the time to teach them, you're going to have a heck of a time convincing them of anything else. So I think that's another big part of being a balanced dog trainer is the human component, being able to say, hey, here's why we're doing this, and not just what, but why, and what it's going to do for your dog. So yeah, I think it's really important that we're able to clearly convey that. And just to touch real quick, I love what Ray said about like not understanding, like reinforcing behaviors without knowing it. That saying you get what you pet, right? You're telling the dog it's okay to feel like this. So I just wanted to touch on that as well, not to get off topic, but that's totally 100% right. Making sure that they understand what they're reinforcing, but also that you're in that moment, you should be holding the dog accountable, not just reinforcing or feeling sorry or feeling bad for the dog, because it's not fair to them. And it's certainly not fair to you as a client and as an owner.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. It was beautifully put. But Shane, let's take it back to the accountability, and then absolutely you can dive into the other questions too.
I think accountability all fails. I mean, I think people take accountability as a negative outlook when it shouldn't be. Accountability should just be kind of this neutral term that like is a part of training your dog. There should be consequences in ways, but there should only be consequences if the dog truly understands what you're asking. And I think accountability is something with owners that is essential, especially if you have a dog that chews up your windowsills and is destructive in your house. If you don't hold your dog accountable for the behavior, but you want that to change, you can't have both worlds here. Like, you have to have accountability to see change. You can't, otherwise all the time and effort and money you put into this is for nothing. The accountability is part of all of that. And it's just as simple as that. If you want real change with your animals, because we do have people that come in with problems like that, you have to have accountability to see that fade or to see improvement with those behaviors and those things going on at your house. And if you can't do it, then you're never going to see the change. So.
Yeah, just one other point I want to bring up, from time to time, especially on social media, you're going to get that flack from people who don't fully understand balanced dog training. And I think this from the perspective of a new dog owner who's shopping dog trainers, who's trying to figure out what is the real story on how to deal with this behavior. I always throw it back to the scenario of you got like a 150-pound human aggressive Rottweiler, and if you have some method out there that we don't know about that only incorporates positive reinforcement, and you can undo that behavior and show it to me, I will change my methods tomorrow. But this is a unicorn. It doesn't exist. And this is why I tell people to ask people to show them how they're going to address these serious behavioral issues. And obviously, when you get up in these larger bully breeds or working dogs, I mean, the consequences are dire, if you make a mistake in these type of things. So what ends up happening, in my experience, is these trainers will quickly recommend euthanasia because they get out of their league really fast. But from your guys' perspective, how would you guide a new dog owner who's trying to weed through all this misinformation that's out there? What questions should they be asking of somebody who says their training is relationship based or positive only, and they don't use tools and they don't believe in consequences, and they think they can handle this all with relationship? What would you tell them? What questions should they be asking?
So yeah, I think that's a great topic for sure. So for me, the idea that, like you said, that we as the owners are going to be held accountable when that dog bites somebody, right? So what I would ask them is, let me see some of this training. Let me see you working with this type of dog, whether that's a video, whether it's posted somewhere. What experience do you have with this dog? You've said a lot, but can I see it in action? Can you explain it in a way that makes sense to me, somebody who's not a dog trainer, right? Your client's talking to you're talking to a trainer. Explain it to me. If you can't easily explain something, then you don't truly understand it, right? Like if you can't make it clear to somebody who doesn't understand dog training, excuse me, what your methods are and how you're going to do this, especially with these dogs that have severe issues, that don't care about food, that are dangerous and things like that. If you can't explain it to me, like explain to me your method and exactly with examples of how you're going to do this. And if you can't make it sound fairly clear to me, then I don't believe you truly understand it. Is a big part of it, right? Also, like if a dog is aggressive and dangerous and things like that, and they don't talk about holding that dog accountable, like asking like, okay, what are we going to do if the dog acts out? If the dog does come at me during the training, what are we going to do? Do you have a plan for that scenario? If they can't say, hey, here's how we handle it, or they don't have things lined up, whether that is a backup for your backups in case the worst happens, and they can't say something that is going to make me feel better, that's another question. What are you going to do if this if the 150-pound Rottweiler doesn't take your treat and comes up the leash at you? And I think you're going to quickly find out that they probably don't have a backup for that, or they don't have a plan, or they're going to say, we're going to use medication, or we're going to do some other thing that isn't really solving the root problem. So I think asking exactly what are you going to do, how you're going to do it, and explain it to me in a way I understand it. And what are you going to do in worst case scenario, right? What do you have ready if this dog doesn't want to take your treat and decides to do something naughty? How are you going to handle that situation?
You just ignore it, right?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to ignore 150 pounds. Yeah, exactly.
Shane, what are your thoughts on that?
Could you say the question one more time for me?
Yeah, if you were just the new dog owner and you've got some pretty severe behavioral issues and you've got some kind of, large or pretty serious dog, and you're dealing with somebody who's telling you relationship-based training or positive-only training, or something that indicates they're not going to use balanced dog training or hold a dog accountable for anything, what is their plan? Like, what questions should they be asking that should set red flags? and get them to reconsider the balanced option.
Yeah, I mean, I think Damien said it all, because the severity of these dogs and the consequences are a lot higher, because I think that's the big thing is if you don't have a plan for the outcome of all of this behavioral problems, the consequences are gonna be bad. Someone's gonna get severely hurt, someone's gonna get bit, whatever it may be. As far as questions I would ask, man, what is your safety protocol when it comes to handling these dogs first and foremost? Are you utilizing a muzzle, or there could be so many questions I ask coming from a trainer that I think we've all been bit before, so we're all very hyper focused on how to handle these dogs, how to approach people, from how long their leash is. Coming in as a trainer, I look at everything when I have an aggressive dog, because I think most people are unaware of distance and stuff when it comes to these dogs. But as far as what I would ask is just really the safety protocols of like, what are you going to do if this happens? What are you going to do if a dog gets out? Just the what ifs, I think, are going to be a big part of it. What if we don't have this dog and it breaks out of a kennel? What are you going to do? And this dog's severely reactive, so it's just asking, the worst case scenarios is going to be a big part of it.
Yeah, I mean, this is invaluable information, and this is stuff that I wish I would have had when I had our first dog. You know what I mean? I basically went, of course, it sounds great to be positive only, and I don't want to ruin my relationship with my dog, which is what I hear balanced dog training will do. So, of course, we try the soft approach to some pretty severe reactivity with our first dog, Luna, and lo and behold, nothing worked. So, it led us to kind of question things and start asking these questions. What are we supposed to do? Outside of just avoiding other dogs and things like that. So, I think this information is amazing. I hope this can get in the ears of some people who can kind of hear this and then understand the source of the information that they may have heard from a rescue organization or something they read online. I always tell people the worst place you can go for dog training is online. You're either you're going to scare yourself, you misinform yourself, or both. It's just not a good place. And this is the reason why we have professional dog trainers who can look at that minutia and be able to call you out for things you don't even know you're doing, like reinforcing the wrong behaviors or have the wrong timing on a correction and things like that. But again, I thank you guys so much for sharing that stuff, because I mean, coming from you guys and hearing that stuff, it just really drives home that point that there's a lot to be said about what balanced dog training is and what it can do and what it's not. There's just a lot of misinformation, and we hope, as a company, we've been around for over 10 years, that we've helped thousands of dogs and owners achieve that level of communication, that we were able to repair a lot of really bad relationships that have gone south and pretty serious behaviors and kept them from being euthanized. So again, I thank you guys, and I'll turn it over to Bridget to kind of wind this down.
Yeah, just to expand on what Ray was talking about, if people haven't seen our other videos, or maybe they don't know, this is literally how Koru K9 came into existence. We had a dog that, as Ray said, we went down that positive route and experienced firsthand the limitations. That is not to say that positive reinforcement is bad. We use a ton of it in our training. So I want people to really understand that Ray and I personally started out as positive-based trainers and saw the limitations of it. If people think that we are harming or hurting dogs, all of us here love our dogs more than anything else in the world. I would never do anything that would hurt my dog. So I always tell owners, I understand that these things can sound scary, or, if you're not educated on them, you might be a little hesitant to do these things. That is why you should go back to our first episode and watch how to find a good trainer, because we're here to help you and educate you. Which is why you should follow us on our social media platforms. We're on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube at KoruK9.com. Of course, our website, Koru K9. I'm sorry, at Koru K9, and our website, koruk9.com. We're here to help you. If you have questions, let us know. We can talk about them on this episode, or we're happy to exchange with you on email or messenger. But gentlemen, this was amazing. I think we gave everybody a lot of really good information, and I'm grateful for all of your time. So see everybody again next time.